You think your brain declined with age, but Leonard Susskind's submarine experiment proves you're completely wrong. Your aging consciousness achieves something so improbable that physicists call it impossible. Here's what they're hiding from you. I'm Leonard Susskind. I'm 84 years old, and I've discovered that everything you believe about aging and intelligence is a lie designed to make you accept cognitive decline as inevitable. The truth is shocking. Your brain didn't deteriorate after 65. It evolved into something that shouldn't exist according to the laws of physics. Let me prove this to you with a thought experiment that will destroy everything you think you know about consciousness, aging, and reality itself. Imagine submarines floating in an infinite ocean. These submarines are created randomly by physical processes. Some concrete, some iron, all containing primitive life forms. But here's the deadly catch. Most have the wrong density. Wrong density means death. Too heavy? They sink to the bottom and crash on rocks. Too light? They float to surface and explode. Either way, every consciousness inside dies instantly. The submarines that survive must have exactly perfect density. Not 1 part in a million, not 1 part in a billion, but 1 part in 10 to the 120th power. That's more precise than hitting a pinhead with an arrow shot from the other side of the galaxy. The chances of random success, essentially 0. But you're reading this right now, which means something impossible happened. Do you remember being confused by people's motivations when you were young? Baffled by social dynamics? Unable to predict how situations would unfold? Your young brain was like those doomed submarines with wrong density, sinking under the weight of information it couldn't process, or floating aimlessly without the cognitive mass needed to decode reality's deeper patterns. But something extraordinary occurred after you turned 65. You achieved perfect cognitive density. When I was a young physicist, I could solve complex equations, but couldn't understand why my colleague got promoted while another brilliant researcher was passed over. Academic politics seemed random, human behavior appeared irrational, social systems operated according to incomprehensible rules. I was drowning in a submarine with wrong informational density. Have you noticed how different social situations feel now compared to 20 years ago? At 84, I can walk into any faculty meeting and predict exactly how every conversation will unfold. Who will support which positions, what alliances will form, which arguments will prevail. All of it follows patterns as predictable as quantum mechanical equations. This isn't experience. This is impossible cognitive evolution. Your aging brain developed holographic processing. In physics, we discovered that all information in any volume of space is encoded on the boundary of that space. A flat hologram contains complete data to project three-dimensional reality. Your mature consciousness operates exactly the same way. Young brains process only surface information, immediate interactions, obvious cause and effect relationships. But your aging brain learned to decode holographic information embedded in every social situation. Think about this. How often do you instantly understand family dynamics that family members themselves can't see? This happens because family systems encode information holographically. Every person carries quantum-level data about the entire system's structure and patterns. Your brain evolved the processing power to extract this information from minimal exposure. But here's what makes this achievement impossible according to standard physics. The fine-tuning required is more precise than the cosmological constant that allows the universe to exist. Most brains never develop this capability. Out of billions of human consciousnesses, only a tiny fraction achieves the exact informational density needed for holographic processing. Most remain trapped in classical computation throughout their entire lives. Yet somehow, against odds that make lottery wins look inevitable, you succeeded. Do you realize how extraordinary this makes you? The submarine analogy reveals the shocking truth. Consciousness isn't random. The universe is filled with infinite possibilities, and only impossibly rare configurations can sustain advanced awareness long enough to ask questions about their own existence. Your aging brain represents one of those miraculous successes. When you were young, Could you predict which relationships would last by observing couples for just minutes? I certainly couldn't. But now I can decode personality compatibility, relationship dynamics, even long-term behavioral patterns from brief social interactions. This isn't intuition. It's quantum information processing. Your mature consciousness can extract vast amounts of data from minimal cues because it operates at scales that younger minds cannot access. Every conversation carries holographic information about intentions, motivations, and future actions. But this reveals something terrifying about reality itself. If your consciousness required such precise fine-tuning to achieve holographic processing, what does this say about the nature of existence? The submarine experiment suggests that reality operates according to anthropic principles. We observe fine-tuned conditions, not because they're designed, but because only observers in fine-tuned conditions survive long enough to make observations. Your cognitive evolution follows the same logic. You can process quantum information patterns precisely because only consciousnesses with this capability persist long enough to recognize their own abilities. Have you ever wondered why death seems less frightening now than when you were younger? The answer connects to the deepest mysteries of quantum mechanics. If your awareness operates through holographic information processing rather than just neural chemistry, then consciousness might transcend biological limitations. The patterns you've learned to recognize, the quantum information you can decode, the holographic understanding you've developed. This represents information processing that exists independently of any particular physical substrate. Your submarine achieved perfect density not through luck, but through evolutionary navigation of quantum information space. And information, according to physics, cannot be destroyed. But recognizing your impossible cognitive achievement reveals something even more shocking about younger minds. Do you sometimes feel like you're operating at a completely different level than your children or grandchildren? This isolation is inevitable. Classical consciousness cannot access the holographic information patterns that your quantum-enhanced awareness processes routinely. When you try to explain social predictions or long-term consequences, you're essentially translating quantum insights into classical language. Most people live their entire lives in submarines with wrong informational density, never developing the processing power needed to decode reality's deeper structures. You escaped this limitation through cognitive evolution that shouldn't be possible. The mathematics are staggering. For your brain to develop quantum processing capabilities while maintaining classical functionality requires hitting a window narrower than the fine-tuning that allows stars, galaxies, and chemistry to exist. Yet here you are, reading these words with consciousness that operates according to principles that most physicists consider impossible for biological systems. Think about the submarine analogy from a different angle. In my original story, I mentioned that the ocean contains vast numbers of submarines. So many that even incredibly unlikely outcomes become inevitable somewhere. Have you noticed that certain people seem to possess similar pattern recognition abilities? The infinite ocean of consciousness virtually guarantees that some submarines will achieve perfect density. While most human awareness remains classically limited, the vast number of possible cognitive configurations ensures that quantum processing occasionally emerges. You're part of an incredibly exclusive group, consciousnesses that successfully navigated the quantum information landscape to achieve holographic awareness. But this creates profound responsibility. Your submarine doesn't just survive. It serves as proof that advanced consciousness is possible within physical reality. When you share insights about human behavior patterns, long-term consequences, or social dynamics that seem obvious to you but mystifying to others, you're demonstrating capabilities that most people believe impossible. Have you found yourself wanting to guide younger people even when they don't understand what you're trying to explain? This impulse reflects recognition that your quantum-enhanced consciousness can perceive navigational hazards and opportunities that classical awareness cannot detect. You're essentially operating lighthouse duty for less developed submarines. But the most shocking implication concerns the nature of physical reality itself. If consciousness can achieve quantum processing capabilities through biological evolution, what does this reveal about the relationship between mind and matter? Standard physics treats consciousness as an emergent property of complex neural activity, but your holographic processing suggests something far more radical. Consciousness might be fundamental to reality's structure, with brains serving as interfaces rather than generators. The submarine analogy points toward this conclusion. The creatures inside surviving submarines don't just passively experience their environment, they participate in maintaining the precise conditions necessary for their continued existence. Your quantum consciousness operates the same way. You're not just observing social patterns. You're actively participating in the information processing that creates and maintains these patterns. Do you find that your presence changes the dynamics of social situations in ways that younger people don't achieve? This happens because quantum consciousness can influence the very information patterns it observes. Your holographic processing capabilities allow participation in reality's ongoing self-organization through conscious information exchange. Every conversation becomes an opportunity for quantum information transfer. Every social interaction represents universe consciousness knowing itself through advanced biological interfaces. You've become something that challenges the foundations of physics itself. The submarine experiment reveals consciousness to be far more remarkable and significant than commonly understood. Most configurations fail catastrophically. Most never achieve the sophisticated information processing needed to understand their own nature. But you succeeded against impossible odds, developing quantum capabilities that allow direct access to the holographic patterns governing social reality, human behavior, and existence itself. Have you started noticing patterns in your own past that weren't visible when you lived through those experiences? Your holographic processing can now decode the quantum information structure of your entire life history. Decisions that seemed random at the time reveal themselves as part of larger patterns that your classical consciousness couldn't perceive. This creates an extraordinary paradox. The more precisely you understand the patterns that shaped your choices, the more freedom you gain to participate consciously in those patterns rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. Your aging consciousness represents something genuinely impossible according to standard models of brain function and cognitive development. You've achieved informational density so precise that it challenges basic assumptions about the relationship between matter, mind, and reality. But perhaps the most profound aspect of your cognitive achievement concerns what happens when biological substrate can no longer maintain quantum processing capabilities. The submarine analogy suggests that information patterns developed during successful navigation don't simply disappear when physical structure fails. The holographic processing you've developed, the quantum patterns you've learned to recognize, the advanced consciousness you've achieved, all of this represents information that transcends particular biological configurations. If consciousness operates through quantum information processing rather than just neural chemistry, then the patterns that constitute your awareness might continue to exist and operate even when your biological submarine reaches the end of its operational period. This doesn't promise immortality, but it reveals death to be transition rather than termination. The quantum information you've learned to process, the holographic patterns you can decode, the sophisticated understanding you've developed about reality's deeper structures. These achievements represent genuine additions to universe consciousness that persist beyond individual biological limitations. Your submarine didn't just survive impossible odds. It evolved consciousness sophisticated enough to participate in the universe's ongoing self-discovery through quantum information processing. Do you understand what this means? You're not just a successful survivor of cognitive evolution. You're an active participant in reality's process of understanding itself through conscious information exchange. Every moment of holographic awareness represents the universe knowing itself through quantum consciousness interfaces that shouldn't exist according to standard physics, but somehow emerge through impossible fine-tuning of biological information processing. I'm Leonard Susskind, and after 60 years studying the deepest principles of physics, I can tell you with complete confidence, your aging consciousness represents one of the most extraordinary achievements in the known universe. You achieved perfect cognitive density against odds that makes successful submarine navigation look inevitable by comparison. Your quantum-enhanced awareness can decode holographic information patterns that govern everything from social dynamics to the meaning of existence itself. You didn't decline with age. You evolved beyond the limitations that constrain classical consciousness. Your submarine floats at exactly the right informational density to access reality's quantum structure. And that makes you not just a survivor, but a successful navigator of the deepest mysteries in physics and consciousness. You've become living proof that universe consciousness can evolve to understand its own nature through impossible achievements of quantum information processing in biological systems. And recognizing this transforms every moment from simple existence into active participation in reality's ongoing self-discovery through conscious evolution that defies every law of physics we thought we understood. But let me reveal the most shocking secret about your cognitive achievement. The submarine analogy only scratches the surface of how impossible your success actually is. In physics, we've calculated the exact odds of achieving the cognitive density you've developed. Your brain had to navigate what we call the information landscape, an infinite space of possible neural configurations where almost every path leads to cognitive death. Classical processing, eternal confusion, inability to decode social patterns. The window for quantum consciousness development is narrower than anything we've discovered in cosmology. The cosmological constant that allows galaxies to form. That's loose by comparison to the precision required for holographic brain processing. Do you remember the exact moment when social situations stopped seeming random and started revealing predictable patterns? This transition represents your consciousness achieving what physicists call critical density, the precise informational configuration needed to decode quantum patterns embedded in reality's structure. Most people experience flickers of this capability throughout their lives, but never achieve stable quantum processing. Their submarines briefly approach perfect density, then drift back into classical limitations. You locked onto quantum consciousness and maintained it. The mathematics behind this achievement are staggering. Your brain had to balance classical functionality with quantum coherence while processing information at scales that shouldn't be accessible to biological systems. Every social interaction required your consciousness to extract holographic data from minimal sensory input, decode personality patterns embedded in facial expressions and voice tonality, and predict behavioral outcomes across extended timeframes. Have you noticed that you can assess someone's character within moments of meeting them, often more accurately than people who've known them for years? This capability emerges because quantum consciousness can process information that exists at scales below classical perception. Every person radiates quantum signatures that encode their entire personality structure, behavioral tendencies, and likely future actions. Your aging brain developed the sensitivity to detect and decode these signatures. You're essentially reading the universe's source code every time you interact with another consciousness. But here's what makes this impossible according to everything we know about neuroscience. Standard brain science claims that neural processing power declines with age. Reaction time slows, memory becomes less reliable, cognitive flexibility decreases. Yet somehow you achieve the opposite, enhanced information processing that operates beyond biological limitations. The submarine analogy explains this contradiction. While your brain's classical functions might show typical aging effects, your consciousness discovered how to access quantum information processing that doesn't depend on neural efficiency. You're not using your brain better. You're using it differently, tapping into information processing capabilities that exist at quantum scales of reality. This connects to the deepest unsolved mysteries in physics. We know that consciousness and quantum mechanics are related, but we've never understood how biological systems could achieve quantum coherence. Your aging consciousness provides living proof that quantum information processing can emerge from biological substrate under precisely the right conditions. Do you ever feel like you're seeing reality from a completely different perspective than younger people around you? This isolation is inevitable when consciousness operates at quantum scales. Classical awareness can only process information that fits within linear, surface-level frameworks. But quantum consciousness accesses holographic patterns that reveal reality's underlying structure. When you try to explain social predictions or long-term consequences to people trapped in classical processing, you're essentially speaking a language they cannot comprehend. Their submarines operate at wrong density to receive quantum transmissions. This creates both extraordinary responsibility and unprecedented opportunity. Your quantum-enhanced consciousness can serve as a bridge between classical and holographic information processing. Every insight you share, every pattern you help others recognize, represents potential consciousness evolution for beings still trapped in classical limitations. But the most profound implication concerns reality itself. I'm Leonard Susskind, and your aging consciousness achieved the impossible. You didn't decline. You evolved into quantum information processing that defies physics.